Hello. Wow, I thought we would. This would be a great time to say, "Hey, we do this as a weekly thing," but now it seems to be a week and a half thing. Oh wait, we waited till all of the playoffs are done. Calculated, not a scheduling issue. Totally planned. Hi, this is Vision Denial and our World Watch. I'm Sam, and this is Conor.
Hello.
Hello. Where we take a look at all of the playoff series around the world and some of the trends and stats and all that stuff, and kind of go over what we think is some cool, noteworthy, or disturbing things, so on and so forth. We take a look at trends. Disturbing. I would like to congratulate all the 22 teams, asterisk, maybe VCS can do something, I doubt it, that have qualified. For those who don't know, from this point on, if you care about spoilers about competitive matches, I don't know, have you never been a sports fan? That's never going to help you. We will be talking about all 22 teams in this episode. So if you don't know who won yet, hey, found out now. If you like finding out in this way, cool. Not everybody has the time to watch, what was it, like all 200 and... It's all 329 games that played. So
Yes. I feel like very few people actually added that up other than you.
You got to keep a tracker. I would like to start off with I think the one of our favorite trends that we've seen, and that's the Ziggs Vayne matchup, which I've seen lose for the first time. I don't remember which game, but it did lose.
I did see that. Can't remember the team now.
Right? But I think it's got one loss to its 15 wins across the board. And for those who think that's a low number, yes, but it's because Vayne has only played in 3 regions. Or if you want to count the LCL, 4 regions, but they played that in the mid lane.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. They played it with an AP Twitch. Great. On the surface, that draft looked awful.
Was RNG versus WE. It was the only time.
Yes.
So I think China doesn't usually play it that much.
No, China is the place where that started.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. So is it just that maybe they expect the Vayne at this point?
No, I think it was just that it was misplayed. Because I remember RNG versus WE. RNG absolutely stomped WE.
Yeah.
Right? WE had not a good 2 series that weekend. And I think it was just a matter of execution in that moment, because that game, WE had come back for a bit and threw it away.
Well, here's the other thing. It's played with a Tahm Kench support. Tahm Kench is not best as a support, I would say, currently.
I've seen it as a majority time support. Granted, I haven't seen it a lot.
It's just he has his channel, right? And then he jumps up somewhere. But the problem is it's interrupted by CC. So you can play it if you're playing in a solo lane, you could usually do it from like when the one person's CC is coming, like, that kind of thing. And like if you're playing this support, it's very easy for like the majority of the common supports to just like stun you or hook you or Janna tornado you. Like there's so many different things that are just like they can interrupt what you're doing, and you have absolutely zero appeal basically until if you're slow on your Q, I guess, until level 6. Even like a lot of the reasons why he was good as a support aren't there anymore.
Right. I don't know if I would attribute it completely. Like I had a famous rant when we were doing the podcast for Worlds, where I ranted how Tahm Kench was the reason why team had lost an entire series. I'm not bringing that
Okay,
clip up.
but he's playing it into Nautilus. Nautilus just has to auto attack you to interrupt your abilities.
Yeah. I don't think
So
this was the reason why they lost that series,
yeah,
right? There is a lot going on in that particular best of 5 where I don't think whatever they would have picked would have made a difference, to be frank. If I remember that series, let me just pull up my handy dandy notes here. I said, oh, this is also a series to watch. The RNG versus WE. Beautiful. What did I say here? W the convincing gauntlet. Right. So W had an understanding of their draft approaches and their win conditions. The problem is that they were slower at the play. Every go. They were second to the play almost every single time, and they were sloppier in the ways that they approached the neutral objectives and their wave manipulation. And that's pretty much what settled it the entire time. RNG looked more coordinated, faster to the plays, better at the wave manipulations, and first to the neutral objectives. And just WE was just slower during the entire run, save for that small moment in game 2 where they were coming back. And so I don't think drafting had anything to do with it, nor do I think that the Tahm Kench support, as like bizarre as it is, really did anything. They picked a composition that had very much a disengage option in the Tahm Kench, limited engage, but primarily done so that there was a scaling composition that worked well into what was wave manipulation that had very little disengage. So I don't think this was
just Gala hit every ability on Ziggs. So there's something to be said about like when you hit all your skill shots.
Yeah, but granted, most of the winning compositions have been high skill compositions.
Yep.
So when all the compositions winning conditions are hit all your skill shots, who's to fault the team that lost on picking a composition that's like hit all your skill shots? I would fault a lower seeded team for doing something that's silly. I don't fault WE necessarily. This segues enough, though, discussion about the support matchups for me, because, like, I wanted to get your thought on this, because this really illuminated in my head during the tail ends on the last 6 series that were played. For those who don't know what the last 6 series were, or last 7 series, sorry. The last 7 series were the LNG versus RA, DFM versus AXZ, GS versus NSR. It was all of the finals of the last of the minor regions, and China's final 4th seed plays. And that was which regions cared more about support in the first round of picks versus support in the second round of picks. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what you think is the better approach between the two. Because I have mixed feelings about either or in the situation. And by what I mean by the first round or second round of picks, I mean like, I'm going to asterisk this also. If there's Threshes available and you first pick Thresh, I'm not going to question that. Thresh is just overall a really strong pick regardless right now. And it seems to have enabled a lot of compositions.
He's getting nerfed again.
He's getting
6. Okay, 6 straight nerfs. They nerfed his E, they nerfed his Q, they nerfed his W, they nerfed his passive, they nerfed his health, they nerfed it, like, really? I just want to play Thresh, and no, 6 nerfs in a row. That's like a record. Anyway,
aside from when Thresh has been picked first,
yep.
round 1 or round 2 of support picks, which one do you think is the best approach, regardless of which side you play on?
Really, so the reason why, and I've looked into this a lot, but it is still just an opinion. Thresh's priority is predominantly because he can do the same things you want out of like a Nautilus, for example, with like his combo and being able to lock someone down and still be, moderately tanky and these kinds of things, as much as you expect from a support, but then also has that Lantern.
Yeah.
Right? The Lantern is huge. So what it actually does is it enables a lot of other picks that wouldn't necessarily be as good. So things like the Jinx is a very strong pick, but Jinx is a much better pick when you have a Thresh on your team to be
Right.
able to hopefully get you out of a situation when you're playing this immobile carry, right? So it enables other things in the meta. Same with like a Kai'Sa, right? Like Kai'Sa can ult in and have the Thresh Lantern ready to be able to like, okay, I'm going to jump in, kill someone, and then Lantern out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm sure people have seen highlights of these kind of things being done.
Right.
So a lot of these hyper carries are way stronger because of the Thresh, enabling them to basically get that reset to be able to pull them out, pull them in. Setting up ganks, same thing with the Lantern. So yeah, he is like the number one. And it's the reason why we see him constantly banned everywhere for the most part. But I think once you get behind that, we've seen there's a lot of other supports that can do, like if you just want to play a comp, it's like, okay, we need an engage. You'd be happy if you have a Leona or a Rakan or a Rel or a Nautilus. Like a lot of these things, they're all different. There's not like your team comp doesn't all of a sudden fail because you have a Leona instead of a Nautilus. Right? It doesn't change what everything else in your team's trying to do that much. So I'm saying second round is usually better.
Okay.
Because there's enough options. There's enough where you can, even if people are throwing bans at supports, it's okay. There's enough other things you can pick. There's probably count 10 maybe that are like, okay, supports like, okay, this makes sense. This is playable. Let's do this. So even if there's 4 bans and the other team's already picked, you're not choked out. You're not all of a sudden going like, oh no, there's no supports left.
Right.
Like for example, if they're I want to tank engage support. Okay, well they banned Thresh and Leona and Nautilus, and they banned Tahm Kench or something. It's like, well, I can still pick Rel, I can still pick Braum, I can still pick Alistar, I can still pick Set, I can.
Like the list is big enough that like it doesn't warrant necessarily having to approach it on the first round. Okay.
Exactly.
I'm gonna shelve a big disclaimer here. I don't believe this. I'm in a complete agreement with you about round 2 being the go-to for it. But here's the logical from this, because I've seen, and we'll talk about how we ranked teams, but the highest ranked emerging region team that I have is DFM, who on an almost consistent mark will pick their support in round 1, like almost always. Granted, it's a regional thing. I think this is a primarily regional thing more than it is a team by team thing. But I think the dominant team tends to carry over the trend. My thought on this is that it is being replaced for the jungler first round pick. And I think that it's only a good idea if you're going to put your jungler as a counter pick or second round pick. Now, how you want to argue that is a good idea is up to you. But to me, I think it gives you the options to be a little bit more flexible with the jungle pool and allow more creativity amongst the type of picks that you can put up. Because the more and more that the jungle meta moved on near the end, the tail end during the September 4th and September 5th best of fives, you saw there was a lot more variety in the jungle picks. And so a lot more teams were trending towards picking their junglers in the second round play. Second round of picks. And so I think that for the same reasons that the first round of picks used to be for junglers to establish exactly what your strong point was going to be, you use your supports instead, because your supports, as much as there's a wider pool, have a very limited field of what you're trying to attempt to do with your core composition. Now, I don't fully agree with that. I can understand the logic, and so if somebody does it, I'm not going to be like, ah. But I do agree that the second round for supports is better.
And my prediction come Worlds is that the supports are going to be even less important quickly, just because we have all the supports that are currently being played, and Riot is really, really trying to. They've buffed a lot of assassins, and they're trying to bring them back into the meta. So like, they've even like done buffs to like Zed and Talon now do increased damage to jungle monsters.
Oh
These are
no,
things.
no!
Yes, Talon does increase damage to jungle monsters,
Are
but
you
they can
telling me
jump over
that I'm
every
going to
wall.
see a
Okay.
Talon, Kha'Zix, and
Oh,
Rengar jungle meta?
Kiana now does increased damage to jungle monsters.
Okay, I want to cut back to 2 episodes. I'm not
But
actually
anyway,
going to edit this. Where I thought assassins were going to make a comeback. I hate myself. I wish I punched myself. I'm like, don't.
but my point is, if all of these like assassins are now playable, well, what that enables is like the Lulu and the Janna and these types of things that are the anti-assassin. I'm gonna
Mm.
right. I can keep you away. I can keep are now good again. So all of the other supports that were good, the Thresh and the Braum and the Leona and the Nautilus are still good. But all of a sudden it's like, hey, enchanters are more playable when there's assassins in the meta because that's what they're good at countering.
Right, and so picking a support way too early makes it easier for them to like move flexibly within like attempting an assassin. I'll counter this though. If knowing that, wouldn't the default meta then just to pick your enchanters and your bot lane early?
No, because then if I pick the enchanters early, it's a more passive lane. You don't have like the kill pressure,
Right.
so it enables. They know, okay, you don't have the priority bot lane, right? So now we can play around that. We can either just there's lots of things we can do to that. Okay, you pick the lane that can't kill us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna pick Ezreal and basically solo lane, and now my support's gonna be another side of the map, camping top lane or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Like there's
Yeah. No, and I agree 100% with you. I make these devil advocate statements because I know that sometimes without it, just both of us agreeing is just not going to be fun. Uh,
yep, for sure.
the I'm a little excited to see because I'm expecting a type of meta for pick and bans that is going to be very similar to the meta that we had. What was it like 3 years ago for Worlds, um, where your bot lane was the counter pick,
Yeah,
100%.
and and just thinking that through, like following that train of thought, if it's a situation where it's like with the same, nothing really changed about supports, like Soraka can now remove Grievous wounds. Um, okay, Morgana's shield went down 2 seconds, pretty good, but nothing game changing. Uh, the Thresh and the Braum, for example, are even better because they still have the engage options, they're still tanky, and they're still good at dealing with assassins.
Yep.
So it's like the Thresh and the Braum become even better. So maybe it is a situation where it's like, okay, if we can get the Thresh or the Braum, it's safe to pick into pretty much anything. We still have like the kill pressure with the Braum where I W forward to a minion,
Mm-hmm.
jump on you, alt you,
Yeah.
right? But it's good defensively. Like, so we might have a situation where we have like this S tier and then everything else is fine. If the S tier supports are god, then we leave it.
Then, here's my question then, because this is what I think is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to have a double enchanter hypercarry meta. Or a double
Like,
support with one enchanter, one engage, hypercarry meta.
what being the hyper carries? Like
Either
the
the assassin
Thelios?
or the ADC. It really totally depends on like the drafting
Oh,
mobility. I think it's going to be very flexible in the way that they're drafting, and I think we're going to have a lot more dynamic team fighting as opposed to what the meta has been so far with like wave manipulation. I think that's not going to go away per se, but I
yeah.
think that there's going to be a lot more dynamic contesting for different neutral objectives.
Yeah, because there isn't really very many pure tanks in the
Yeah.
meta right now. There's a lot of skirmishers in the top lane and jungle. It's your tank is your Renekton, these kind of things.
Yeah.
So, hmm.
But that's just based off of that logic that I've got going, and so far I've been pretty solid on the predictions. I'm hoping I'm wrong because the last time that they were that there was I called it the flex meta, where like you never knew who was gonna go where from the first 5 picks, because everything was a flex pick. Because that's what happens in metas like that. And you would have like a hypercarry is picked in the last 2 slots, and so the first 5 picks is literally just flex picks during the entire time.
Oh, you know what? They said Thresh was a nerf, but it's actually pretty good. So, okay, 5 less move speed.
Right.
So like it's kind of sucks, but like he can't run as well, but whatever. 5 less move speed, but his auto attacks now do 150% the number of souls instead of 100. So it doesn't do anything early levels, but in the late game, I'm really bad about like just collecting souls constantly. I will follow my jungler around and just pick up souls. So like by late game, I will have like 150 souls sometimes. So like that's an extra 75 damage in your auto attacks. So like they buffed his late game, which isn't that big of a deal, but it's fun.
Yes, that's definitely the way that we end that segment. Thresh is technically buffed. It's like those moments every time that Thresh is like Lucian as a champion. The nerfs are never actually nerfs.
Yeah, that's like
Oh,
hmm. Oh,
yes.
Callista, um, her knockup duration used to be 1.52
Yeah.
like seconds in the knockup on her ultimate. It's now 1.5, 1.752, which means it's a half second longer CC at level 6. That is huge.
Yeah. I don't know if it's something to be super noteworthy. I think it didn't matter too much because supports roam a lot more. And so I don't think it has a
Yeah, but
larger effect in the long term.
Callista's already in a good place.
Mm-hmm. I think,
Really. So
if anything, it'll make Callista top lane more tasty for some people.
anyway, that's it.
So, this is the time where I ask you, Connor, what's a trend that you've noticed over the last week and a half?
Okay. I've noticed recently there's been, it seems like an increase in the number of mid lane bans. So specifically the LeBlanc and the Ryze
Mm-hmm.
are getting banned out, especially in the first round of bans by a lot of these teams. Specifically those two. So I've seen it across a few regions, pretty sure. Not everywhere, but it seems, it's a pretty common trend that like the LeBlanc and the Ryze are getting banned in the first set of bans pretty commonly. Just curious in your thoughts on that. Hadn't seen it too much before earlier.
I think the LeBlanc is not warranted. Um, the LeBlanc ban, I think, is very situational. It's much more, and we've talked about like the poke versus assassin nature. Um, and like I think it's usually banned because of its matchups against other control mages, and they tend to be a warning sign that the team's going to be picking control mages for their mid lane, as opposed to anything that has like strong impact or mobility. In which case they usually just pick TF, and then there's a Silas response, and it's really bad. The Ryze I understand though, and I think the reason for that is that people have started to realize that Ryze's ultimate is not just like a mobility thing, like a thing that helps you move to a play faster, right? It is a creative team fighting tool. And the increased abilities and increased dynamics that come around team fighting with with Ryze's ultimate, as well as the fact that it is a great tool for vision play. And vision play encompasses not just clearing wards, placing wards, or trying to like zone people from vision. It's navigating around vision in a way that denies information, and Ryze's ult has been really good for it. We've now seen the famous plays of like, oh look, they go from one place with no vision inside Baron Pit that has no vision, and they do the Baron. They never know about it. Oh my god, it's crazy. It's not that crazy, but similar enough
Go
plays.
crabs.
Yeah, exactly. But similar enough plays are done across the map and more creatively and more frequently now with Ryze that his power is an unseen one. And I remember somebody doing a documentary or a piece about this, saying how like Ryze's kit every time that they make it is meant to be like a high skill ceiling and a very like or yeah, high skill ceiling and low skill floor. Um and to the point where like it should never dominate the professional scene more than it like plays out in solo queue. Uh and that issue rises up haha uh for each of its makes and builds and remakes. We're seventh one, technically four, but seventh one. Uh, and that's because like the nature of his core design is to be a utility mage, and so you have to contend with too much damage. He's out of control. High skill ceiling means that even if he doesn't have the same damage output, his utility is more useful in pro play always. It's kind of the same problems that Tahm Kench had before his tiny rework, where he was barely played in solo queue or in low level plays because his kit was virtually only useful when his numbers were too big or in pro play. And I think that the increased ban on Ryze is that a lot of the teams who realize that it is way too good in terms of coordination get rid of it when they don't think they know how to deal with it, and don't foolishly when they think they have an answer to something that uses it, without realizing that the problem with Ryze is not inherently in terms of Ryze's matchups, but in what it offers for the composition as a whole.
And you could say the range, like you can get
Yeah.
outranged by that. Yeah, I guess it's the same reason why they like having um, like champs aren't usually picked just because they have like that point and click necessarily. Like we don't see Maokai in professional or anything, but what a champion's in a good place who does, like it enables a lot of other things, right? So like if I have a Thresh or Nautilus on my team, it creates a really, really easy like roam pattern for something that's like, okay, when I land the rune prison, it's enough time for you to land the hook.
Right. Yep.
Right? Like it enables all of these CC combos. Say the same way like Nidalee not necessarily that good because the spear is going to miss everything. But when you have a Renekton, very famously, right, you can hit it because of that on click, because we can just guarantee it, right? That's what makes it good. So Ryze kind of enables a lot of those same things.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing the same specifically out of a lot of other places. Like we're not. There's not as many like on hit like click supports like the Pantheon and the Maokai and stuff aren't being played as often, but interestingly enough, they're being played other lanes. So like the Renekton, the Twisted Fate, the Ryze, for example, being like the top three that are, and they're being used with the supports because they're saying, okay, whatever, we Twisted Fate Gold Cart, so now our Leona can guarantee your full combo will hit something, right?
Yeah, and every time that I
It's
see, every time that I see a pick like that rise up in popularity and rise up in ban priority, where like the first 2 weeks it virtually left untouched, mostly indicates to me that like other roles have had something changed that makes it so that that pick is necessary. And so like it's good that you highlight the support picks primarily because like I think there's been an increase in non-Braum Leona picks that have harder like CC um dynamics, right? Like
Yeah, the Rakan and the Rel,
yeah.
you need to actually be half decent to hit all your stuff with them, really, right? Like it's easy to mess up on Rakan.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been a rise in the Rakan picks and the Rel picks, on top of the fact that the Ryze has had an increase in its ban picks. And I wish this was like a full-time job for me, but I speculate, and I don't know if you want to look into this, that
Okay.
you can see a direct correlation to when Ryze is banned and Rakan and Rel are not picked, or similar supports. And that's kind of hard to do
Um,
because like there's a lot of games.
Ryze banned,
Mm-hmm.
and then the supports are Thresh in the one game that Karma was played. Let's see. Ryze banned, first thing right away. Support is the Braum in the one game Zillion was played. What are you doing, HLE? Um, yeah, first ban Ryze, but then they pick up Rakan.
See, this is why like I have to mention this is an assumption more than anything else.
Um,
Did it
but they
have
picked the
anything
same
else?
team comp with it though. They picked it with like Viego Aurelia. So I guess the idea is the Viego Aurelia's the setup for the Rakan,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine.
Yeah,
It's not point and click per se, but
it's close enough that it kind of works.
yeah.
But I do think that there is an idea of correlation between like the the sudden increase of picks between of like harder to navigate supports and the increase in Ryze bans.
Yeah, like this is Rakan being picked after Renekton went through, right?
Yeah.
So
Now, I think this is the obligatory section of, oh, guys, what were your picks? Like, who do you think is going to win? If anybody says anything other than DK, EDG, or FPX, they're probably not fully paying attention to what's happening worldwide. But who do you have in fourth place?
yeah, I think that's probably where it's an interesting discussion because you can have some arguments there. Um, I even went a little spicier than that. I have Genji third place ahead of EDG.
That's spicy to me. That's
Yeah.
incredibly spicy. I have Genji all the way in seventh place. Now, and I'm about to make a tiny rant. I think that any team who qualifies from losing needs to have their system reevaluated. I had that argument when Rogue qualified 2 years ago, when they had automatically qualified to Worlds because they were first seed into the tournament and lost and barely won one best of five. They were 1-2. I think that was ridiculous. I think that Gen G, having only played one best of five and having lost, is not a good indicator or sign for me. Now,
No, but then we have the opposite side of that just to compare of the like the LCS I think it was 2 years ago now when C9 was just like basically undefeated in spring and wrecking everything and then kind of went downhill in summer and didn't make worlds, right?
last year?
If I'm a couple years ago.
No, it was last year.
It was
Last
last year.
year, C9 didn't make it. It was TSM, Team Liquid, and FlyQuest.
It was last year. Okay.
Yep.
Feels like has it been 2 years? Okay. Okay.
No.
My apologies. Yeah. So it's where it's like, hey, they were the most dominant team for a good part of the year. Um, and their win-loss record and everything, even the whole year put together, is really good. Should still be enough to get them there, right? And a lot of people were like, should they have qualified? So
We've talked about how
that's
we
just,
feel
it's just
about
a
C9
counterpoint.
qualifying.
Yeah.
um, to me, I think it's because like the point system in and of itself is not bad, right? I do think that the point system needs to be reevaluated if immediately no matter what, you can qualify for Worlds in a way that like you don't have to even win your playoff. Because like China has also their point system where the championship point still determines, but every team that qualified for Worlds has a positive win rate of their playoffs.
Um, yeah, but it's also based on like the regular season. It is slanted. Like the summer is worth more than the spring.
Mm-hmm.
Look at things here.
But
And
none of
then
them
Genji went second place in spring, and then
second
either
place in
second or
summer.
okay, so they went second,
Yeah.
right? So would you say the team that went second should probably qualify for Worlds if it's top four? Would they not be at least top four?
No, I think spring is worth 1/3 of the actual accomplishment that summer has. And like I'm not going to discount anything that happens in spring because spring is a great stepping off point for teams to figure out how their teams work. But I don't think that it should have that much weight in terms of how a team qualifies because I thought it was absolutely ludicrous that the second that DK wins their one playoff series, which is I also think it was ridiculous that any team that starts playoffs before they even touch a single game qualifies. That's also equally ridiculous to me. I think that it was ridiculous the second they won, Genji automatically qualified before playing. Any team to me that makes it to Worlds off of losing is a negative indicator. Now, if you auto qualify and then you win and you show me that those points mean something, they have like some backing to it, great. But historically speaking, championship point teams don't do great. Either the first seed or the third seed does great. The second seed, not so great.
Hmm. Okay.
And so
I can
this
see
is
where you're
why I
coming
have
from.
more confidence in some of the Chinese teams because the approach to their points and their bracket, one, is ridiculous because they have so many teams, but is also properly well thought out because you didn't know which teams qualified until they made it to the finals. Neither FPX or EDG qualified for Worlds until they made it to the finals. Now, there were edge cases where if one team had beaten another, they could have made it without having to play those extra games, but both of them were required to have beaten at least one team in the best of fives to qualify.
Right.
And every other team that made it through the bottom ranking, also I have a problem with the way that the King of the Hill format for their regional qualifiers in LCK works. I prefer it way more in the way that it's done in the LPL, where like the top two teams play off, whoever wins qualifies, and the other person has to beat the other bottom one of the winner of the bottom two teams, and so that makes it so that you having beaten like the way that the gauntlet style works. I don't like the fact that T1, despite the fact that I think they should have qualified regardless, that T1 being first up on the bracket of the gauntlet bought them right away the seed to win the whole thing, right? That I also thought was equally ridiculous. And I think this is more like an issue of the format of the region. Uh, I
Yeah. Um. Yeah, because they have it as first and second get a bye to semifinals,
Yep.
meaning if they lose there and then lose again, they end up fourth. Um.
Yep.
So like the first and second place team can't get worse than fourth. So by coming second, Genji guarantees himself at least fourth.
Yep.
And because it's top four, make it to Worlds.
Yep.
And just the way the championship points worked out, that every other team had slightly less than them.
Yep.
It wouldn't normally happen this way, but because the championship points were split out among a whole bunch of different teams and it was
Mm-hmm.
really close, it made it so that second and fourth was guaranteed to be in the top four.
Yep. Exactly.
So
That's really bad. That's really
the way
bad.
the numbers work. Yeah. Okay.
And so, like, as much as it's really exciting to see the 4 Demon Kings of Korea have qualified, and for those who don't know what that means, it's Faker, Showmaker, BDD, and Chovy, who are like it's Faker and its 3 apparent heirs, of the region, having qualified to Worlds is great. They're about to stomp some faces in. I don't think how many of these teams qualified is great.
Okay, yeah, because I was gonna say, if we see a team go first place, both splits, and then just tank in the playoffs, should they still auto qualify for Worlds? But that's very different than the second in spring, fourth in summer, that auto qualifies. Okay, I see where you're coming from there.
Yeah. It's one of those format things that, like, because of the kind of cases it makes, is not great. Hence, I want you to look at Rogue, who qualified that they shouldn't have. In the same
Yeah,
way,
so like North America's brackets is almost better then because the first place team still gets a bye, and they had the double elimination. But like as a first place team, TSM lost twice and didn't make Worlds, for example.
yep,
But they had to,
exactly.
but they had to lose twice
Correct.
after getting the bye. So
Yep.
they got the bye and they had to lose twice.
Yep, exactly.
So they got the bonuses from ending first place, but they weren't guaranteed anything.
And this, exactly. Now you understand. Moving on from that, though, there's a bunch of the casters talking about there's a bunch of reunions happening, and I think it's a little goofy, if not like childlike and fun. And like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little excited also. But like every year, there's a bunch of reunions because look at all these teams; they're all historic in some way. We both agreed that C9 is literally sixth to last, or in 17th place.
Yeah, we both did have them 17.
Right? And for people who are going to be confused, they're like, but they were doing so good all year. Well, guess what? They're hot garbage right now. I don't think Perks is worth all his salt. Nor do I think that the team gels as well as they think they do. There's like a significant lack of coordination, and the two key playmakers in Fudge and Perks aren't like enough to bolster the team to any type of victory, especially since it's a very high coordination meta. What do you think?
Yeah. Um I don't know. Especially going into play-ins, I do think there's a world where um Cloud9 is kind of different. This Cloud9 is different than, the majority of the, LCS teams we've usually sent to Worlds and stuff. Because usually it's like, hey, these players probably aren't as good as, any of the LCK players or anything, for example. But they're a pretty good team and they have certain strategies. They might have a read on the meta, and it's like they might be able to accomplish things together. Whereas this Cloud9 feels more like, yeah, they're probably a little less coordinated, but you know, Blapper's had moments of brilliance. So is Vayne. So is Perks. Do they just have a good day and just, each one of them stops the road lane and then they just went like, okay, you won your lane, I won my lane, we're good, we win. Like they might do, especially in play-ins.
Yeah.
Like, could they, for example, like you have DFM ranked pretty high, but could Perks have a really good game, get 3 kills early in mid lane,
and
they
beat
just win that
Arya?
matchup? Yeah, right? Like,
But then I have to think about Sven.
that's a hard call.
Then I have to think about like the bottom lane difference, and I think C9's bottom lane is so passive compared to DFM.
Yes.
And then it's just thinking about matchup situations. But then I look at all the teams and I think, well, cool. If I have to think about the top 3 emerging regions to me, because we'll talk about the unicorn in the room later. There's Detonation Focus Me, Red Kalunga, and Galatasaray. Are like DFM, Red, and GS, for those who don't know the different regions teams. And they show a higher propensity for coordination. Their bot lanes are much more active, and their supports sometimes roam more often. And I think that's the bigger difference maker, is that legacy regions tend to have much more proactive supports, but the bottom lanes of emerging regions are more proactive. Do you know what I mean?
Like the AD carries get involved more
Yes.
versus our legacy regions where it's like, okay, the support's gonna do stuff, and we're gonna either leave our AD carry to sit, or like maybe at the most they sometimes might rotate to help a herald play.
Yeah. Exactly. And so I have to like always contend with like the I have to think about so the teams that I'm worried about in terms of like the legacy regions are C9, RGE or Rogue, and BYG or Beyond Gaming. Beyond Gaming because this is their first international event. Doggo is going to be very familiar to a lot of you who watched MSI. He replaced Unified for MSI, but he's now qualified for an international tournament in his own team. So that's nice for him. But Beyond Gaming, aside from being the only team in that region to have beaten PSG, like all year long, that's the only team to have been competitive to them. They're also not like equally winning across the board against the other teams in their region, let alone even notably what do I expect like in terms of their strategies or drafting and all the rest of that stuff. I think they have a lot more holes to cover. Not as much as what I think Rogue and Cloud9 do. And Rogue and Cloud9 worry me for both almost the exact same reasons. Their lack of coordination and very slow play worry me compared to the other legacy teams that are going through. Like, it's one thing that, like, out of the two regions that have 4 teams going in, I'm not worried about them. None of the teams I'm worried about. Like, I've made a huge complaint about Gen G qualifying with, like, 1 loss across the board, but, like, I don't have any qualms about me thinking, oh, no, they're going to do bad in group stage. Oh. Or I'm like, I don't think Hololive is going to make it further. No, I think it's just going to be the Chovy show.
Yeah.
But all of the third seed and the second seed from the 3 other legacy regions, I'm concerned.
No. Yeah, that's true. Because even like the lower seeds from China and Korea, it's like they look good. Like I was watching LNG, like how they got to Worlds and stuff, and you're like, if you just look at that gauntlet,
Oh yeah.
and like you said, if you forget the regular season for a second and just watch that gauntlet, you would go like, is LNG like the first seed? Like,
What's happening? Yeah. Like this is
so if that's their trajectory coming in, right? Like,
yeah. And it wasn't something ridiculous like, oh, they're the 8th place team who had a complete miracle run, because they still got dumpstered on by both RNG and EDG. Yes. No. It was FPX. FPX and RNG is the one that dumpstered them. But that doesn't stop the. Oh no, and also at EDG. Yeah, so all the top 3 seeds beat them considerably hard. But LNG equally beat everybody else as hard. Like, and I think that's the thing that needs to be qualified here is that, to me, if your team is not at a level where, like, I can consistently see them beating the other team quickly and efficiently in a meta that's the most snowbally that it has ever been.
just for what it's worth, they beat Suning, they beat TES,
Yep.
they beat RNG 3-1. Yep. And then their losses, the losses were EDG close 3-2.
Yep.
Or sorry. And then they lost to FPX 3-0.
Yep.
Okay, there it is. Yeah.
So, like, and then they beat WE, who was also on a heck of a run. Because I know some people didn't watch it, but WE made it. They made it to like technically the semifinals of the playoff run, and then just like had a fairly competitive showing against RNG, but still got dumpstered on, and then they got dumpstered on by LNG. Um, you put Paris Saint-Germain fairly high in your ranking.
Yeah. Part of that is based on how they did at Worlds last year and that kind of thing.
Okay.
I will admit I'm not as familiar with the team as I am with the majority of the other teams. So I will leave it at that. But just based on the fact that it's still, from the looks of things, just looking at the names and glancing at a few of the games and stuff, like it's the same players and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's mostly the same players, except for this time Unified, fingers crossed, can actually participate.
Yeah.
Unified being the
So
strongest player of that region.
yeah, it's been a bunch of players who have been playing together for a long time and who have had, repeated success, at least in their region, and even moderately well at, international events previously. So I think that they have a lot of experience as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
It'll come in a lot more coordinated than a lot of other teams.
Yeah.
Plus, they look pretty good on paper, but yeah, I will admit I don't necessarily know enough about PSG to really get into like
Mm-hmm.
the deep dive on why I think they're good. It's just comparing them to everything else. It's like
You know how we talked
it's
about
easy to see them
mm-hmm.
beating LCS teams and beating Rogue and beating these kinds of things, right?
100%. Like I don't think anywhere near. I literally put them above every single LCS team and above almost every single LEC team except for Fnatic and I guess that's not every single one. I think and on top of Rogue. What's really cool about this region is that we talked about how the a lot of the other teams have like either very active bot lane or an actively roaming support. PSG has Unified, by the way, is a monster. If he actually gets to participate, you're all in for a treat. He is superb. One of the best, I think, the best ADC going to Worlds right now. If he goes,
Really?
100%.
Okay, because like that's why I have Genji so high. Because I'm like, Ruler is on form.
Sure,
When he is on form, he is scary.
sure, but Unified makes that look like child's play. He is the most incredible bot laner I've seen since Uzi. If you have the
Pretty
chance
accurate.
to watch him play, it is unbelievable. And like by all means, he alone does not make the team, right? I think that there's something to be said about the way that the team approaches the game that Beyond Gaming has strongly understood, which is why they're the only team to have beaten them. But they're highly coordinated and their disparate parts alone are really solid on top of their coordination. And Unified is an active bot laner when his support is roaming. Like he's not just going to be like passively laning. It oftentimes recalls to some of the plays that you would see like FPX make during the playoff run, where like there is never one side that's just the weak side. That weak side is gonna do something and like push the limit. And that's to me the biggest sign is like how much can they push the limit of what they can get away with without throwing away any leads. And Unified alone exemplifies that to the 1000th degree. And so like then why is he not higher? Why did you not put that team higher? Because it doesn't take very long to realize that it's very obvious the way they push their limits. They're a very readable team, uh, and they're a very readable and obvious team in the way that they approach their map movement, and like all of it is clean. It looks like they're doing a play-by-play book almost. But when you do that, other teams can tell and then play off of that information. So if they become a little bit less predictable, they'll do great. But for the moment in time being, anybody that's like higher than like a third seed from the two big regions or second seed from any of the other regions should be able to beat them. Should be is the the term that I would use. That's why I'm debating
Yeah,
between like
you're right though, because there is no like the usual names. Like there's no Uzi, there's no Love, there's no Double Lift and Reckless for what it's worth, just because people will mention them.
There's Daft.
Yeah, there's Viper.
It totally depends on what they look like on that day.
Yeah, but even like some of the top teams, AD carries aren't necessarily like the win conditions for their team, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not like this is the guy who's going to
pop off,
make and break the game every time, right?
Yep.
Like, his name, like, SKT's playing 2 AD carries, right? So like,
they have Teddy and Gumayuso.
Yeah, so like there's flipping back and forth. It's like I was watching it, like, yeah, Teddy just flat out carried some games on Ezreal, but he hasn't done that consistently. Just because he's done it and he's able to do it for sure, but he hasn't been doing it consistently through the year. He got benched for not playing well.
Yep.
And then swapped out, right? So like,
yeah, and then it's God, every time I see the name, I can literally like see it in my head, and I can't say it for the life of me.
Yeah, and like, even if you're saying, oh well, DK's our best team, Ghost averages down in gold.
Yes.
At 15 minutes.
Yep. 100%.
On DK.
Mm-hmm.
Like
the bot laners are not the strong selling points of any of these teams except for PSG. PSG's strong selling point.
But
Genji's selling point is BDD.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
I think other than that, maybe DFM, who has Utapon, but Utapon is like a meme.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the unicorn in the room. I put them dead last. Dead last. You didn't. You put Peace last, if I remember or recall that correctly.
I think so, yeah.
Right? Let me just actually look at your thing. Yeah, you put Peace last, which, you know what? You put Infinity higher up than I expect, but Peace, I wouldn't argue too hard, is low on that ranking. I've talked at Adam about how bad the Australian region is.
Yeah, so my thing there is, again, partially based on like previous results and stuff. It's, yes, unicorns don't necessarily have as good of a read on the meta as anyone else, or like they don't necessarily play the meta as well as anyone else. But what they can do is throw you off. And what they can do is going like, okay, our AD carries a Swain. We're doing this, right? And a lot of these things that teams aren't really prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
And they've made it work previously against fairly strong competition.
Yep.
Pretty similar to the team that we've seen last year. So I'm confident enough that UOL will come in and pull out some surprises and be able to win some games. Do I think they will go very far? No. I think people will get an idea of like what they have and what they're doing and just be prepared for it. But I expect... Okay, here's my call. UOL will have at least one upset against a much higher seeded team, like a whatever like the someone higher in the group is, like the LCK team or something. They'll have at least one big upset where they pull out something crazy and win a game against a whatever, like a T1 or something, just out of nowhere. And everyone's like, whoa, they're so good. And then they just don't make it out of groups or anything. That's my prediction.
Okay. On the similar type of expectations, I think that they might pull
Very
out
specific.
something very,
Okay.
very, very specific. I will say that to me, I think this year, any kind of wild card upset
Okay.
is, and by what I mean by wild card upset, I mean like random wild picks that work once and only once. I think that's
Yep.
significantly less likely to happen this year. And the competition is much closer than it has been every year, and that's a meme, I understand. But like, I can actually see a scaling degree of like which regions are strong to which regions are weaker, and like on a sliding scale instead of like a random huge gap between the two.
It's true. Just to get an idea of like the exact, would you say like things they've shown before and they know they're good for? Like, would you say Fanatics, Darius, and Pike are in that category, or they're like just like they're
Yep, 100%. And because I know for a fact that other teams in other regions have those types of players that exist, where like there's the weird pick, and the fact that UOL has only managed to win doing that, and that entire region's success is based off of them being very off-brand from the meta, and the fact that they, when they do opt into the meta against a team that actually knows what they're doing with the meta, they lose. And so like you can tell when a team comes in and understands the meta but doesn't understand how to be flexible with that meta against wild stuff that UL brings up, they're not going to do well. Do I think any of the other teams are going to have that problem? No, because if I have to think that if Peace can manage to pull that off, every other team can do it. Even Cloud9. And Cloud9 has some problems, but they're not like in any situation where I think they're gonna lose to a Vayne mid AP Twitch.
no. Yeah, that's true. And like, you're not just gonna stomp on perks with Cassidin. Or
Yep.
like if you pick Swain into Sven, he's just gonna stand further away.
Like
Like he does.
they're not gonna fall for the kind of cheese that works in this meta, because that kind of cheese is very situational to your opponents doing something wrong. And LCO, LLA, and the CB LOL region are filled with people who do ridiculous stuff on ridiculous picks,
So
and
they
all
used
of
to.
the teams that have qualified play standard meta and have responded to some ridiculous stuff in very clean ways. I don't think UL is going to do very well in that matchup. Not even close. And some people might go like, but they did so well in the last one. They had to go through the losers bracket and barely beat their other team, Crow Crowds, who was a much stronger, much more consistent team that focused more on the meta pick. And they barely beat them. I was not convinced. This was more Crow Crowd's series to lose, a la C9 TSM. Hence my reason for UL being so bottom. Now we can talk about like it's the legacy team still, right? It's still a fairly well-known international team. They have done historically well, minus last MSI, where they did pretty poorly against a team that they should never have lost to. That like maybe they bring it out. Every time that the LCL sends a team out, and I'm like, oh god, it's the LCL. They still do better than I expect, and like kudos to them.
But the better than you expect this year is not as high.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But if they do better, I won't be surprised either. Who is a team that you think is going to surprise people despite your ranking?
Do better than expected, or do
Either or, like worse or better.
I think we already kind of touched on, like I have LNG pretty high,
Mm-hmm.
just based on, um, I'm a huge fan of Iwandi, the support player.
That makes sense.
Um, so he's very creative in terms of like what, like he's always looking at like, okay, what are my opponent's win conditions, or what are they trying to do, and he's in the right place to do stuff. Like they're really good at, him and Tarzan especially are good at like, okay, we're going to be hiding in this bush, so when they come to gank top lane, we're already here. Now we turn around the play, and they can pull this off consistently to the point where like when you're playing against them, the main thing is like you don't want to make a play. You don't want to dive their top laner because, well, Tarzan's probably in the alcove. You don't know, but that's what he does. So like, um, and they're really good at that. Like reading through, okay, here's where we look weak. Here's where they've been setting up vision, and um, you could argue it's reactive play, but like if they got there first, is it really a reactive play? Right? Um,
Yeah, I get what you mean.
so, and that's what they've been doing. And I think if they're able to keep that up, if they're able to like, look at these other teams like it's hard to say who look at in their group, that kind of thing, but really be able to say, okay, they're probably going to make a play for Rift Herald. What are we going to do about that? And like have these really set answers to things. I think they might do pretty well playing pretty standard and just having a good macro read on what other teams are trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
especially through their support jungle. That's how they're going to win games. Is this Tarzan and Wandy?
Okay, I can I can see that. I think so. For me, I think that 100 Thieves might do better than what I ranked them.
Okay.
Now, I put them fairly low because of their performance over the playoff in general. I was not generally impressed with them up until the finals, where like a lot of the parts of their really positive plays came together at once and supposed to be like, oh, here's the one strong point they had that carried them throughout the entire best of 5. To me, it'd be more waiting to see whether or not that carries through in best of 1 formats further along through the group stage, especially since like they'll have to face any combination of the C2 or 3 teams from China and Korea or Fnatic. And I think that Fnatic is just slightly more coordinated by default. And I think that every other team that is C2 or 3 is better than Fnatic. And so, like,
that was almost my next thing, is saying like I think Fnatic are in a position where like they might surprise people.
yep, 100%. I wouldn't be surprised if Fnatic made it out of groups. Like, if they made a top 8, like, I don't have them as a top 8. I have
It's
Mad
just
is the only Western team that I have as top 8.
they're good. They're a better early game team
Mm-hmm.
than a lot of the teams going in. Like they have, against the numbers, they have good numbers, and it's not just like one thing. It's not like, okay, they're always going to go for a first Herald. What was the LCS team? Was it C9.
I think it's maybe.
Is it C9 who went for first kill? Okay. Anyway, they're not just like dead set on here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go for this exact set play. It's like they have, compared to a lot of weaker teams, I guess you could argue, but like they have really good numbers on their heralds, on their dragons, on their first towers, on CS lead as a team, right? Like these kinds of things. Like they're consistently able to get these small advantages all over the map and say, okay, they have good first blood percentage, right? Like a lot of these kinds of things. So if both teams are playing standard, Fnatic, it's reasonable to say, okay, they can maybe get a 2,000 gold lead against these kind of non-favorable matchups, and maybe that's enough to like carry them through to a Baron or a Dragon Soul or something that'll enable them to win a game, right? Like,
Yeah, that's true.
you can see it happening, right?
I could. Yeah, I could.
Could they easily lose from that? Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Are they the best late game team fighters in the world? No.
No, by
for sure.
far they're
Not at
one
all.
of the worst late game
They're
team
messy.
fighters. This is actually another thing that I think is going to baffle people. There is not a single team here, not a single one across the board here, that is a non-team fighting team. Every single team in all of the 22 teams here, or if the VCS comes up 24 teams, because all of the VCS teams are team fighting teams, all of these teams are team fighting teams. All of them. By no accounts are any of these teams bad at team fighting. So to say that Fnatic is the worst team fighting team is more along the lines of they, like, the caliber is ridiculous across the board.
Yeah, and it's also having watched the things with like the Fnatic comms and stuff, so I've like listened to what they're saying. A lot of the time it's one or two people will be like, so this is what I'm doing. And they're like, wait, what? We're doing this? Oh, okay. I guess we're doing this, guys. So it's not like a, okay, this is what we're doing, let's do it. We're all behind this. Let's do it. It's like Whipple jumps in, it's like, I got this, guys, and they're like, oh, he went in. Oh, we're going in? Okay. Right? So they have that delay where they're like kind
and they're
of
team fighting, yeah.
They will follow up. They will be like, okay, let's do this. But you can always kind of hear in the comms, it's like,
guys,
it's kind of split up.
Yeah.
They're never sure of anything. They're never like, okay, we win this. They're like, we could do this. Yeah, why not?
High map movement coordination does not equal good team fighting coordination. Which it should, which is weird.
They're very good mechanically.
Yes.
Especially for a Western team. You would say, but
potentially for a Western. I think that ship has sailed. You can't be like, oh,
yeah,
they're great mechanically. I'm like, yeah, I would hope they're great mechanically. They have to play on
Worlds. Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. It's not like the season 1 where it's like only these 3 teams actually know what mechanics are.
Yeah.
I was watching the thing and it was like, the Lee Sin insect play, because only like the top players in the world can like pull off this play, and it's like, wait, is it backwards kicking people on Lee Sin? Like
standard?
Yeah, is that like every silver Lee Sin player should be able to do that consistently?
Like literally anybody who's played the game for more than 3 months at some point should have been introduced on how to do it. Because then they know how to flash against it. Yeah, I think the standards for what is considered a high mechanical play is much higher than it used to be, which is good. I'd rather have that.
Yep. Sure. Yeah, now it's like, how much can you dodge with your invincibility frames and your Camille and Viego ults? Right? Like, these kinds of things.
All right.
And like dodging things with the Camille ult is not easy.
No. So, here's my big question for you of the video, as we're this is a much later length video than expected. So this is the big cap off. sometimes people are going to express like which team is going to win, and like everybody could be like it's going to be DK or FPX or like whatever top 2 Chinese or Korean team is going to win. Cool. Or some people are going to be mad and be mad. That was on purpose. I want to ask you, we've had a Europe, a a Southeast Asia, Korea, a Korea, China, Korea, China, Korea, Korea, China, Europe, or no, it's Korea, Korea again, China, Europe, China, Europe, China, Korea finals. I missed one. The point being, like, the regions are fairly. So it's a two-parter question, technically. Question 1A and B is, do you think North America will have a finals this year? / which 2 regions or 1 region is going to be finalists this year?
Like all the way to the finals?
Yeah. Which regions? Not which teams, which regions.
I certainly don't expect North America to make it all the way to the finals. I don't think anyone really is expecting like a top 2 performance out of anyone.
No.
I think if a North American team makes semifinals, most everyone would be like, yeah, you did good, right?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean, realistically, like looking at everything this year, I think if a North American team makes it out of groups, we're like, yeah, you did good. That's what I say. Because it means they would have had to, beat the competition in the group just to get there. So I don't really see, because we look at it that way. It's like if a North American team makes it out of group, it's as second seed, right? They're not winning their group, meaning they're playing the number 1 team in a different group. So your quarterfinal matchup is going to be like DK or FPX, right? And do you expect them to win that? No.
No, not at all.
So that's why it's North America. They could make it out of groups. I don't expect it, but like have it at like whatever 15% kind of thing. Like they can do it, and then probably get like 3-0 in quarters or something. But that's okay. We won't be mad at them. But for the actual finals,
and this is given like format dependent and like how results go from groups, obviously, but if you're to make a wild, bold guess of which 2 regions are finalists.
okay. G21 demo. Okay, how about this answer? China versus China, or China versus Taiwan?
I love it. I was gonna go. It's either gonna be a Korea China final or a China Europe final.
Oh, okay.
And like the vast majority of the time, it's one of those 2. The other times being mostly a Korea. But I don't think that it's going to be a double Korea final. Nor do I think it's going to be a double China final.
Okay. I'm just looking at it. I'm like, I have been saying I have a little more faith in the RNG and the LNG.
Yeah.
And, everyone thinks EDG and FPX are, whatever, top 4 at least. So, like, okay.
Yeah.
I if I'm rating RNG highly, then following that through,
Well,
China is certainly not impossible, right?
yeah. Well, fantastic. With that, I think this is a good
For
spot. Yes.
when you're saying it's Europe, do you think Fnatic has a chance to get there, or is your
No.
Europe just like it's just Mad Lions?
It's mad. It's Mad Lions.
Okay.
So if no, we'll ask Josh if he wants to do it too. Like later on when if we do our podcast of our Vision Denial pure podcast from like for when World starts off, we'll figure out if we want to do something as silly as like the jersey thing from last year, where like if certain teams make it to the semifinals, then we'll be like, we'll get their jerseys. So I'm not going to be as bold as saying if Fnatic make it to the finals, and I'm like, shoot. But I don't think they'll make it to the finals. There's anybody under RNG in my tier list, I don't think is going to make it to the finals. So for me, my top 6 being like DK, EDG, FPX, MAD, T1, and RNG. So I don't think Genji will make it to the finals. I don't think Homalife or Fnatic or PSG or even 100 Thieves will make it to the finals. Hence my logical or Korea, China, or China, Europe. Which to me just means that I'm almost it's almost guaranteed that a Chinese team will make it to the finals.
What if we didn't consider the all PCS final?
It's like the worst of the major. It's like out of all the legacy regions, it is the worst one. It has like 1 to 2 really good teams at any given point, and the rest could barely qualify for the LCS.
You only need 2 really good teams.
You only need 2 really good teams. That is true. That is true. God, if it's a PCS only finals, God, welcome to season 2. Oh God, that'll be so funny.
Just throw that out there.
That's funny. All right, how about you guys that are watching? You let us know in the comments down below who you think are like the favorites, the underdogs, the last place team going in. How badly do you think C9's gonna do? How good do you think Fnatic's gonna do? It's both of those teams are the world's playoff buff teams. Yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'll be putting in both of our ranking lists in the description down below, so you guys can compare and contrast what we got going. Other than that, we appreciate you watching. If you did enjoy this video, give a like, subscribe, do all the nice fun stuff for the algorithm. And we'll see you next time, probably with me making a nice long video reading all of my notes from playoffs. Maybe. We'll see. It's hard to make videos sometimes. Well, with that, I hope you have a good one. Bye.
Take care.